everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney, Orkin Lucasfilm. It's your boy, you slice it. Legends. Today, I have for you Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor by Matthew Stover. What a title, huh? I know it's backwards for you, but this is an interesting thing that Matthew Stover has done. And I really enjoyed it. The simplest explanation for this book even existing, I think the smallest, most least important part about it, is it fills in something that didn't necessarily need explaining, but moving forward with the Rogue Squadron novels and stuff, Luke is starting to build his Jedi Order. Trying to. Of course, he won't actually get students till after the Thrawn trilogy. But we learn how and why Luke finally gave up his military status and became a separate entity. So there's that. That's like the basis you can go, though. But this book is so much more. And this book is leagues above Shatterpoint, in my opinion. In almost every way, shape, and form, this book is better. I love how the hook of the book, the hook starts with Luke Skywalker going to this guy, asking to be investigated. He says that he feels that he's committed, mass murder, war crimes, and he wants to be put on trial. But he needs somebody to investigate the claims first, or to look into it. And then we get this story. This book does a whole bunch of things. Not only is this a love letter to the EU, but it's also just a great love letter to Matthew Stover himself, We have some interesting things in here because we have a bunch of Marvel Comics connections. We have the main villain himself. We have Then Shisa's in here from the old Marvel Comics, The Mandalorian. So that's tied in there. Every character feels spot on in this book. Though I can also see this not being for everybody. In the same way where, even though most people like Shatterpoint, it wasn't for me. And I feel like this might be the opposite, where this is a more niche one that you'll either love or just won't care for. I'm trying to talk non-spoiler wise. But this book talks about a lot of interesting things. The most interesting, of course, being when the villain discusses the dark and how that's supposedly different from the Force and stuff. And then, of course, the entire time I'm hearing about the dark, I just keep, especially if you've read it before, your mind just leaps to the Episode 3 novelization. One candle is enough to light the darkness. Love can ignite the stars. And love can overcome the horrors of this book. I really enjoyed the villain in here. I think he is really interesting. He's different from, say, Palpatine or Vader or Thrawn will be in the future. He's not exactly a Sith. Also, there's another connection here, just a slight spoiler. They mention Prophets of the Dark Side, which is a direct connection to the Jedi Prince young adult series. So that's really fun. Because apparently the bad guy was with them for a time. But I'm sorry. I'm having trouble exactly discussing the plot. Once we're done with the little introduction with Luke, it goes back to Luke, of course. He's been somebody in the military, but with Force powers helping out. and he kind of wants to bail out, but Admiral Akbar promotes him to general, just like Obi-Wan Kenobi and his father was during the Clone Wars, like Mace Windu was during the Clone Wars. And he doesn't exactly know how he should feel about that. He's trying to figure out his place in this world. Meanwhile, we have all this stuff going on with this warlord, with this, sect of the Empire, led by this Lord Shadowspawn. Who is this Lord Shadowspawn? What are his motivations? Why haven't we heard about him before? Well, I think maybe you have, but that's in spoilers. Han and Leia's characterization here was phenomenal. Lando was great. And we get some familiar faces if you've read other works by Matthew Stover. I'm sorry. This book is very cerebral. I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's kind of weird. There's a lot of introspection, thinking from the bad guy, but then there's also these parts near the end where I don't think Luke is actually supposed to be there, but he's like talking into the mind of the bad guy, and it's kind of weird. So it's hard for me to describe. It's a very thought-provoking book, though, because Matthew Stover is usually pretty good at that. Even though I found Shatterpoint boring, it's still a thought-provoking book, and so is Episode 3's novelization, and so is Traitor, the New Jedi Order. So, another banger for Matthew Stover. I'm sorry that I'm not able to fully express how I feel or explain the plot. I mean, the Shadowspawn, without spoilers, is causing trouble, and so our heroes go to stop it on the planet Mindor. But Shadowspawn seemingly wants Luke to come to Mindor, so what's that all about? That's kind of the overall hook and sink, the gist of it without getting into specific details of the plot. But I loved it. And I think if you're a fan of Stover, you will too. I'm going to leave it there. I'm talking about some things. If you don't want spoilers, leave. So Luke is a general. I love how different he is from Anakin, and also similar. You can see a lot of similarities, because this is 2008, so the Clone Wars by Filoni was already coming out, and I think Legacy of the Force was over by that point. Fate of the Jedi might have been done too, now that I'm thinking about it. So, this guy, Matthew, this awesome guy, he already had a broad understanding of everything going on in the whole of the universe. So he ties in stuff back from the prequels, ties stuff in there, and I loved it. I love that this book is kind of a mix of the two. But I love how Luke is a much better Jedi than Anakin was. If we're being honest. Anakin had a good heart, but he wasn't a very good Jedi. And I guess it depends on how we're using the term Jedi. I feel like Luke fully embodies, even when he's struggling like he is in this book, and he's trying to figure out his place and what decisions he should be making. All that doubt, all that struggle, is still what sets him apart. Anakin had doubts, but never about his decisions during combat or anything like that. Like, you're harming my friend. You gotta go. Simple as that. There's no discussion about it. Whereas Luke values every life, and so taking life is a big thing for him. And I love that about him in this book. I also love how people respect him, and he can be authoritative just like Anakin was, but he doesn't seem to revel in it. Where I do feel that while Anakin respected his men, like, Republic men, clones, he did revel in that role, in that leadership role. He enjoyed that. I don't think Luke really does in this book. And then the big one, Shadow Spawn. Shadow's pawn. Shadow Spawn is Black Hole from the Marvel comics. Well, the classic Star Wars comics, which I reviewed a while back now. But yeah, so that is such a deep connection to bring back a villain like that for this book, which is really cool. Also, Shadow's Spawn, Shadow's pawn, we learn that the guy we're following for the first 100 pages is not even actually the bad guy. Because Black Hole is some old creepy dude, who can control other people. And so, who do we find out once Luke saves the mind-controlled person, or the possessed person? It's Nick from Shatterpoint. So that was really cool. And then Nick's kind of just a character for the rest of the book. And then you get some interesting conversations between Luke and Nick, because Nick, has met Mace Windu before. He doesn't name drop Mace Windu, but he does say that he's known a Jedi before. We also get a third name for Black Hole in here, which is Chronal, which was interesting. And then the biggest thing about this book, the biggest thing to talk about, really, which is the dark. This has to be harking back to the episode 3 novelization, because it is so similar in some of the ways that Stover writes about it, that, it's weird, because Black Hole does not believe in the dark side, really, or the light side. He believes in the dark. And it is discussed in the book much better than I can re-explain it, but it's a really interesting viewpoint. The most interesting part was when he was speculating, like how the reason that Palpatine was so successful in the prequels was because his whole goal was destruction, which is what the dark craves. He craved the destruction of the Republic, the destruction of the Jedi. And while those were Palpatine's goals, he thrived, he succeeded, he won. But the instant he became Emperor and actually started trying to build something, to build a grand empire, instead of just destroying the government that was, his power was lost. And it was inevitable that one day he would get defeated. And I just found that fascinating. We move on ahead. The next character they bring back near the end of the book is Carvaster, who is the villain from Shatterpoint. And that was cool to see him again. But this is a great character piece for Luke, especially. And there's great moments between all the other characters. And I'm just so happy that I read it. This is one of the books I missed going through my post-episode 6 stuff. But I think this is a hidden gem. I think this is really good. I can understand why some people might be put off by it, but I really enjoyed it. There's also this whole thing with holo thrillers. It's like a constant thing where there are just, movies and plays and stuff, holodramas being reenacted about their lives, and not all of it is, of course, accurate, which I thought was really funny. But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm doing a very bad job of describing this book, but I think the best way to experience it is to read it for yourself, kind of blind, like I did. And I think you get a lot more out of it by doing it that way. So, it's got my seal of approval. I recommend it. Please, please, please do check it out at some point. Anyway, up next, we finish off the X-Wing comics. I got a fan fiction to read after that. And then we get to something I'm very familiar with. Actually, sorry, I'm not. Then we get to Jedi Prince. Yeah. So let's get into that. Till next time, guys, may the Force be with you.